I have been covering AIPAC on my social media for a little bit because things have gotten so crazy, given that there are so many primaries happening all across the country. AIPAC is a huge problem. Why? Because they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars in American elections to try and sway the elections, whether it's primaries, whether it's generals. They dump millions and millions of dollars into making sure that they are electing candidates that are going to be pro the Israel lobby. So much so that we ended up getting a president for 4 years, President Biden, who paved the way for the situation that's happening today. If anybody thinks that that administration was in any way not complicit in what's happening today, y'all can kick rocks. Like, seriously, like y'all are living probably under a rock that I'm about to throw at you. Those of you who are new, my Substack is where you can find all of the videos, like the full video all in one go at the Political Pendejadas podcast tab. If you are watching on YouTube, welcome to my channel. Make sure that you subscribe and feel free to check out the Substack. So the DNC rejected a resolution targeting AIPAC and dark money. On Thursday, the Democratic National Committee Resolutions Committee rejected a symbolic resolution condemning the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, advancing instead a broader measure targeting dark money in electoral politics. So instead of calling out AIPAC specifically, they decided to just have a more broader version of dark money, which doesn't necessarily include AIPAC in there. Proponents criticized AIPAC's $14 million spending in the Illinois primary contest, which I specifically covered on my Instagram because there was a story that broke where Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, who was the Palestinian candidate for the primary in a district in Chicago, she was smeared through dark money payments that influencers were taking to smear her in order to get a liberal Zionist elected. Lo and behold and lo, the liberal Zionists got elected. The proponents criticized AIPAC's $14 million spending in this Illinois primary, arguing such expenditures raise concerns about undue influence over democratic debate and policymaking. They are 100% correct on that. We have seen that time and time again, so much so that now we are in full cahoots with Israel and have started a war that is probably never going to end. A Pew Research survey released this week shows that 80% of Democrats hold unfavorable views of Israel, up from 69% last year, reflecting a sharp disconnect between party leadership and its base. That is 100% correct, because why the hell are we still having quote unquote leaders in the Democratic establishment saying we should continue to side with AIPAC, we should continue to side with Israel, despite every piece of evidence showing that it is a detriment to the United States and voters and taxpayers to continue to fund this genocidal apartheid state. It is so unpopular within the Democratic base that it most likely cost Kamala Harris the presidency, because the DNC itself ran an audit of that campaign in 2024. And they said, because of voters' views on Israel, Harris most likely lost that election. 100% correct. Related measures on Palestinian recognition and arms transfers were referred to the Middle East Working Group, which party leaders defended as essential for managing complex internal divisions. So there is a fracture within the DNC about this entire thing, and that's why these resolutions were even put into place. Now, the rejection widens a rift between Democrats and voters critical of Israel's military actions, potentially creating electoral headwinds for the party in 2026 and midterm races. So I have an additional Truth Out article that basically, kind of goes over a lot of what the fuck is going on within the DNC. So now this is where it gets juicy. The DNC Resolutions Committee also tabled, get this, a pair of resolutions to recognize a Palestinian state and support restrictions on aid to units in the Israeli military accused of war crimes. They shut both of those down. So not only the AIPAC thing, but they also shut down calling for calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state and supporting restrictions to aid to the IDF. Crazy, like so completely out of touch. And this is why they lost so much of their voter base in 2024 to the point of, I think it was around 15 to 20 million voters decided not to even go to the polls in 2024 because they didn't like either party, right? They knew that they were not going to vote for Trump, and they were so upset with the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris's failed campaign that they just didn't end up voting at all. DNC members also sent to the working group a resolution calling for an end to the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran and pointing to potential war crimes in the suspected U.S. strike on a girls' school in Manab that killed at least 175 people, most of them children, on February 28th. So there are people within the DNC who are dissenting, right? Like, that's the only reason these resolutions even came about, is because there are people within the DNC that want the party to shift and change and become much more progressive than it has been with these establishment Democrats. And so that in itself is notable. However, there are still too many establishment Democrats within that party. We can point to Slotkin, we can point to Josh Shapiro, we can point to Cory Booker, we can point to so many different Democratic quote unquote leaders that are so out of touch with their voter base that they continue just fucking it up. In a memo urging DNC members to adopt the resolutions on Palestine and AIPAC, the IMEU pointed to polls showing that the vast majority of Democrats, 77% in August of 2025, agree with leading human rights groups that Israel is committing the crime of genocide in Gaza. Support for providing U.S. military aid to Israel has plummeted across the political spectrum, including among Republicans and especially younger voters. The polling found notably strong support for Palestinian rights in Texas, and a historically red state. According to a poll released on April 6th by the IMEU Policy Project, conducted by Data for Progress, 76% of voters in the March 3rd Texas primary agree that Israel is committing a genocide. So there are so many polls that they decided to include in this resolutions as part of convincing them to change their mind. But the DNC decided to just shut it down altogether, despite every statistic saying that voters are becoming much more progressive than they ever have been before. Now, nationwide, a Pew Research survey released on April 7th found that 80% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents, that would be people like myself who have shifted away from the Democratic Party, are voting much more independent than they have been before, but will sometimes vote Democrat if there is a progressive on the ticket. So these Democratic-leaning independents hold unfavorable views of Israel compared to 69% in 2024 and 53% in 2022. The unfavorability keeps increasing every single year that they do these polls. At this point, it's probably at 80% to 90%, and we're eventually getting to 100% by the time this administration is done. Like, it makes no sense, and people are legitimately calling for the DNC to just completely, like, self-implode. Like, just self-implode and get a new party at this point. The duopoly continues to put us in this state where it is always going to be the lesser of two evils. They are both evil, right? Like, in the minds of voters, they are both bad. What progressives are asking for is, if the party is not going to change, let's make a new party, right? What I always like to remind people is that there is a much more democratic process that we can instate in this country. It's called ranked choice voting. There are certain states and cities that have implemented this locally. We need to implement it federally. If we even get to the next, 3 years after, if we even get to the primaries, quite honestly, or the midterms, I should say, because there's already a concerted effort by the Republicans, which was included in Project 2025, that they want to fuck up the midterms, right? They want to rig the midterms to ensure that Republicans don't lose. And there continues to be talks that they want Donald Trump, or perhaps somebody in his cabinet, that they want Donald Trump to run again. He's a wannabe dictator, right? Like, he continues to say, oh, we need regime change in other countries, while enacting the same level of atrocity that he claims he wants to liberate other people from. So all progressives are asking for is, hey, Democrats, get your shit together so that we can figure out how we're going to get out of the fascism that we're currently in. But Democrats, remember, have paved the way for this moment. The Democratic establishment continues to take AIPAC money, right? Foreign state money. The Democratic establishment continues to screw over their own progressive young voters in every single election. Because what is it that Democratic and progressive voters actually want? Universal health care, universal education, higher education, universal childcare, right? Like, these are things that are attainable if we defund the military complex and we defund the police. All of these things are 100% attainable, to the point that Mexico just recently passed universal health care for the entire country. But these things are 100% attainable, but they will never happen if we don't have a true opposition party, which it looks like we never will, because the DNC had the perfect opportunity to pass these resolutions and they chose not to. Girl, I'm so sick of this. I fucking hate it here. I know that you are so sick of it too. I am so glad to be back on this podcast. I'm so glad to be back on YouTube. Thank you so much for paying attention to this episode. Thank you so much for paying attention to the news. I know that things are chaotic and it is very, very easy to disassociate, but I hope that you will stick around and continue to chat about these things with me and unpack the colonial empire that we are living in. I will see you guys very, very soon. Make sure that you subscribe on every channel I'm in: Instagram, Substack, YouTube, and Threads. Don't forget Threads. And I will see you next time.